Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Repurposing Show for the 28th of July. Great to be here. Glad you could all make it. So welcome to everyone in the chat, everyone listening live, everyone listening on the phone. There are a few people listening on the phone. And welcome to those who listen to this podcast later. It's the first show of the week for the 5D Media Network. We've got this show today, the Repurposing Show. Tomorrow we've got the One People Show. Tomorrow, and the following day we actually have the Collective Imagination, and followed on the following day by the Enjoy Show. These are all shows for, of, and by the One People, and we invite you to not only participate today, but in all of them. And there are other shows later in the week and on the weekend as well, related shows. But this first part of the week is the busy part for us. And we're really enjoying it at the moment, getting some really interesting things discussed and out there. And that's what we're here to do. So today we're going to have quite another energy and information-dense show. We're going to have an update from our panel member Rena, and from Joe and Vanessa Bragg, who are organising the Opal meeting. We'll be speaking to Hope about her plans. She has some great plans. Then we're going to be talking to a politician friend of ours from South Australia, Anne Bressington. And then we're going to have a discussion about governance, specifically about self-governance. So we have quite a lot to get through today. So without any further delay, I'll bring in the rest of the panel, starting off with Hope Moore. Good morning, Hope.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. So great to be here. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Yeah, me too. It's, we've been having discussions behind the scenes, and I hope we can replay them like we were having them there, because we had some really good ones. And Rena, how are you today? Rena Iliadis? Don't forget to unmute.
Oh, yeah, that unmute button. Where is it? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone.
Indeed. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. I'm really looking forward to today's show. I think we're going to have a really good show and lots of things to get through, so it's going to be lots of fun.
Yeah, busy. And Scott Bartle from Perth in Western Australia, how are you?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, good, thanks. Good to be here and look forward to today's show.
Indeed. We've got many things to talk about. The first thing we're going to do is have an update from the panel member, Rena. Now, Rena is the producer of now 2 movies on the subject of, corruption in local politics, called Pirates of the Suburbs. She just put up the second part 2, last week, and followed it up almost immediately with a little snippet for a council meeting. So, Rena, do you want to actually give us a quick update on how part 2 is going in terms of views, and how part 1 went, and also what was the update about?
Okay, well, I'll start with the update. The update, I think the video had gone out on a Friday night.
That's the Pirates movie itself? Yeah,
that's Pirates of the Suburbs 2, which is actually in 2 parts. So it's one movie, but it's in 2 parts, Part A and Part B, so Part 2A and Part 2B. And within 48 hours of that going out, and mind you, I don't believe in coincidences, there was an article that was published in our local paper, and it's entitled Melton Mayor Under Investigation. And basically what it says is that she had apparently offered, I'll just read you a little excerpt from the article. It says, I was contacted by Kathy in regards to procuring preferences, and she offered to use the council's money in exchange for preferences. She offered up to $100,000 to fund certain projects. And so in the short little video, which is the follow-up, which talks about this article, apparently this investigation has been going on since soon after the elections, which had happened in October 2012. In a 10-week period following the elections, there was over 300 complaints, probably closer to 400 complaints, specifically in relation to Melton City Council. And I find it very strange that they took almost 7 months to actually even let the local people know. But what we've found with our local media in particular is that they present a very skewed view on and a very skewed sort of almost biased, stories on what actually happens at the meetings.
Is the bias for the people or for the local council?
No, usually for the local council.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the first video, the original Pirates of the Suburbs, there was an article that had appeared in the paper that essentially had wording, they used terms such as, residents stormed the council and stuff like that. But if you watch the video, no such thing had happened. And in fact, the wording that was used in the article to describe the events of that meeting kind of brought on comments in the article section of things like, where's the security for council and where are the police at times like this, and, these people should be in prison and these people should be jailed. So you can imagine the sort of flavour that the article had. And if you watch the video, no such thing had happened.
Yeah.
And that's always been the case. And what I had noticed, which I found quite strange, was that when the meeting was adjourned, which is that little short 4-minute video, which is actually entitled Melton Council, The Aftermath, if you go and take a look at that, which actually shows this article as well. What I found really odd was that when that particular meeting was adjourned and they went off to call the police again, the journalists actually, there's a certain area in the chambers where the journalists or where the media sits, and they actually packed all their things and moved with the council into the chambers, which I find very odd. I mean, if this is meant to be, unbiased third-party, paper reporting on events in a town like Melton, why are they going into the chambers? Why are they even in on the... I mean, the public isn't allowed in the chambers to listen to the councillors' conversations and what it is that they're discussing. So I don't know why the media, the local media, would be allowed into the private chambers of the councillors.
Well, there's obviously a close relationship going on there, but the tone of the audience when the council chambers came into the council, do you want to describe that for the viewers? Because that was quite startling.
Yeah, well, we actually missed it. The meeting started at 7 o'clock, and this was the first meeting after the release of the video. So the video was released on the Friday night. The article appeared in Monday's local paper, and the meeting was the following evening, which was the Tuesday at 7 p.m. Now, we actually missed the meeting. The meeting began at 7 p.m., and we arrived there at 9 minutes past. And there were a couple of people out the front, and one person in particular who never misses, a single word that's uttered in any of the meetings, was outside, and I found that quite odd. And I asked this person, what's going on? Why are you outside? And they said that the meeting was over, and when I asked why the meeting was over, they said that it lasted all of 7 minutes, and that apparently when the mayor had entered the chambers, someone yelled out something to the effect of, "Please all stand for the criminal," and obviously anyone would find that offensive, and then the rest of what had occurred is actually in that video called that 4-minute video called Melton Council, The Aftermath. And essentially they were asking things like, why did you give $50,000 of public funding to the soccer club, interest-free, with no conditions or terms in terms of when it's expected that they'll pay it back. Apparently this was a loan to them 2 months ago. And it also came out that there was $105,000 given either shortly before or shortly after the elections to a soccer club. Actually, it was a sporting club. I'm not sure if it was a soccer club. It was actually a sporting club, so that they can build a kitchen. Now, I went through the process of, getting a new kitchen for my home, and I can tell you for $105,000, you can get a pretty awesome kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're planning to do with that kitchen. Perhaps they're planning to feed half of Melton through that kitchen. I don't know. But that's certainly a lot of money for a sporting club to receive.
It is. Now Rena, the corruption in the local councils, what we're looking at is a symptom of the whole system from the ground up.
Yeah.
And this is something we can bring up with Anne, because Rena and I had this conversation about the system really allowing local people who are drawn into local politics to get involved in these sorts of behind-the-scenes shenanigans, and then they're drawn up into state politics. And if they've already been doing things that are under the counter at local level, then there's leverage on them to play the party line and to cooperate when they're drawn into state politics. And we're speculating that that's the way that it's done. It's one of the ways that it's done, to draw people in that are controllable. And why don't we ask Anne about that, whether that's been her experience as well. She's observed that going on. But the video pirates of the suburbs has had reaction from one particular gentleman in England, which was very positive.
Yes, Roger Hayes, who has also focused on his local council in Britain, and he's part of the British Constitution group, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing similar action, and from memory, they were following the Magna Carta Article 61, which is non-compliance, civil disobedience, basically not giving local councils any oxygen. Mm. And from the comments that have been posted there, this is a universal issue. It's not an issue that is only relevant here in Australia.
To Melton even, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so this is, the movement towards independent local communities organised by the people to serve that group properly. That really shouldn't even be arising if the system was really serving the people properly, but clearly it is not.
No, and this kind of goes towards what you were just saying earlier. There's also an element of these people who are in council becoming victims of the system. The system is set up purposely to entrap individuals basically inside their own dilemma, so that if they do, have a moment where they feel terrible about what's going on and the things that they see, they're in a position where they're trapped and they can't actually speak out about it because they've taken advantage of certain things that have been put in front of them in the interim and along the way. And it becomes a situation of in for a penny, in for a pound. So in many ways, they're actually victims of the system rather than the perpetrators of what's actually happening.
Yeah, well, that's a view that we need to take because it's the more compassionate view. They are victims of the system in the same way that we are.
Absolutely.
We need to maintain that view, so good point to bring up. Rena, thank you for that, and congratulations on the movie and the progress it's making. And from the sound of the phone call that you received earlier, there was apparently some government department wishes to speak to you about the mayor as well. So be interesting to hear.
To mute.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to hear what transpired there next week. From for whatever you can tell us, but sounds like they're coming straight to the source, which is great.
Will do. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Thanks, Rena. So what I'm going to do now is to bring in. I need to do this on his mobile because he's mobile. I'm going to bring in Joe and Vanessa Bragg, who are the organisers for the event in New South Wales on the weekend of the 16th, 17th of August. There's the phone ringing, and they're on the road at the moment.
Good morning.
Morning, Joe. How are you and Vanessa?
Very well. She's just getting out of the car. It's been,
Okay. Got a bit of a choppy signal, so you might want to just stand still a moment, and if you're moving, just so we can stabilise that would be great. Joe, we're just checking in with you to see how the organisation for the meeting is going and how many people roughly have shown interest at this point, and anything we can help you with.
Yeah, well, at the moment, we're starting to flow fairly well again. We had a few block visits for a couple of days, but everything's coming together pretty well. We've had roughly, I think, within all of us added up at the moment, it's about 20 of us. We've had some great conversations with a few of the people coming that I've touched base with. Fantastic. I was just saying to anybody out there, if you're even just thinking about it, I mean, this is a planning weekend, and we really don't have what the blueprint looks like yet, and I think people will be surprised what they can add to the whole weekend. It really is a one-people gathering. There's some that have been trying to do things for years, and that's fantastic. They bring, a lot of the past, different communities have been put together, but this is a whole new blueprint and a whole new energy. So, I'd say anybody that really wanting to come, please touch base. I haven't got any more photos up as I said I was going to. We've had a few issues with the internet. We've now got the satellite system put in last week, and then we had issues with some of the routers and bits and pieces. And I've been doing a bit of energetic clearing work. We had a little bit of attack on us last week. So anyhow, that's been cleared up. We've been doing a bit of work on that, and the ball's rolling well. We're actually on the way at the moment to picking up some more bits and pieces. I got back from Sydney yesterday, picking up other bits in Sydney. So that's all coming together. We've got some fun work. Ladies coming in tomorrow and Wednesday, which I've been sort of sweating on. All of a sudden this morning, they've both rung and confirmed. So, everything seems to be swinging along well. We will have a little bit the itinerary out. I've been helping fine-tuning that. And mind you, that might change, but it's just to give people a little bit of a rough outline. We won't be holding fast to anything because let's see who comes and what they bring. But
just on that point, Joe, just because we did talk about this before the show, just wanted to emphasise, because Joe's got a pretty choppy signal, and I'm getting most of it, but just to reiterate what he said was that the itinerary that's been published is an outline. You could take the meals as being yes, there will be meals, but everything else is optional, because we want this to be a weekend that serves the purposes of the people that come. It is a planning weekend. We're there to actually pool our ideas and get down to, really, the sequence of events, the sequence of things that need to be done to put this project together, treat it as a proper project, and make sure that everybody who actually comes there has a chance to participate in whatever aspect they want to participate with. And, the objectives are obvious that we want to. One of the things I want to specifically focus on, or that I hope we will, is what needs to be done in and around the property that we're visiting in Lake Conjola there, to get it to the stage where we can use all of the buildings and have large groups for 2-3 day periods to do whatever it is we need to do to plan projects and teach each other what we need to teach to get this whole thing going. So, Joe,
Chris.
Yeah, Vanessa, go for it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say, while Joe's been doing the doing bits and pieces, I've been getting some downloads, and I said to Joe the other day, and I don't know whether I shared this or it's just come in this week, but I said we need to build a gateway, and Joe sort of said, well, contemplate, what do you mean gate, and how do you want it to look? And I said, well, I don't feel like it's actually a physical gate. It feels like it's a gateway entrance into the property, into just allowing people to kind of step through the gateway or portal into really operating and working from that one people energy, really attuning yourself to being all that you can, unlimited, absent limits, eternal essence. And I think that will be the interesting part of the weekend, is actually coming together physically on physical property, but learning how to kind of step out of that, what we've done, and really just allow and be all that we can be, absent limits. And so the gateway is, it feels to me like an energetic entrance into what can be achieved for this weekend. And I feel like, there may be a gate, but it's not a gate, it's just like a portal in. So, any help that we can get energetically in terms of people working. We've had sick kids, we've had computer issues, we've just been a block, and it took a few days, and I went, hang on a minute, I think we're under attack a bit. So we've done a bit of work in the yesterday particularly, and cleared it. But plenty of things that people can do in terms of just clearing their attack for people to find their way, and it needs to find their way to being able to connect, would be really appreciated and supportive.
Yeah. Vanessa, thanks for reminding me of that. I'll be speaking to Sandy and Kim of the Mama Bears later in the day, and I'll bring this to their attention because they do listen to the show, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help out on the energetic side, establishing that, because essentially what we're creating that weekend is an energetic portal, and you can feel like the entrance to the portal will be the gateway, and inside that energy, inside that portal is the energy of the one people. And everyone that comes there, if they're kind of conscious of it and consciously add their energy to it, it'll really it'll change the whole atmosphere of the meeting. It'll really build it up. Yeah,
and that's where I feel we're at. The physical side is in place. The beds are there, the space is there, and now we need to bring energetics in to really rise up. And work with that. So that, would be wonderful.
Yep.
All help appreciated.
Yep. All about creating the new. Great. Look, we'll leave it there, guys. We'll leave it there. Yep. But Joe's going to put together a little piece that we can read out in the next few shows over the next few days, just to keep the message going out there. And we'll talk to both of you live next week.
Okay. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Joe and Vanessa. Appreciate your work. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, well, that's fantastic, really good, and which leads me straight to the next topic of, will hope come to Australia?
I think I'm going to.
Oh, that's what we'd love. Love to get you down here.
So, if I can just tell everybody what my hopes and plans are and what I'm trying to manifest here. I've been feeling very called to take a visit to Australia. I have a lot of different friends in Australia that are working on various projects that have different ideas. What Joe and Vanessa are doing in Lake Conjola is one of them. I'd like to be there for their event on that weekend. So what I'm going to be doing is putting together a pretty well-organized campaign to help bring hope to Australia. Some of the ideas that I have, like I said, this is just a thought in process right now. I haven't actually put the campaign together yet, but I'd like to just offer myself to the people in Australia to come out there and consult with different individuals on their projects to help get their projects up and running, to bring all of my skills and my talents and just to offer that to everyone in Australia, to bring a little bit of the Fix the World services to Australia as well. And so I'll be putting a campaign together, probably on a crowdfunding website, detailing the itinerary and asking for any donations to help bring me out there, to pay for the plane ticket. And we'll see how it goes. I think it'll be a short and fast campaign, and I'm just really looking forward to being there. I think it's August 17th and 18th. Are those the correct dates?
Let me check that, Hope. Make sure I confirm it correctly. Don't trust my memory, particularly at this point in time. And yes, you've got it. The weekend of the 17th and 18th, and there will be some things happening on the 16th. If anyone wants to make it a 3-day weekend, and my intention is to do this show from that location on the Monday. So for me, it'll be a 4-day weekend, which will be fun. Haven't done that for a very long time, but that's the dates. And look, we really hope that we can bring hope down here. What do you need from the people who are part of your organisation in Australia and the rest of the people listening from this show? What do we need to put together for you?
Well, there's two things. First would be if we can put some crowdfunding together to contribute towards the price of the plane ticket, which I think is a little over $2,000 for round trip. But in addition to that is I'm looking for hosting families. If anyone would like to host having me at their home, I think I'll make it a little bit of a tour in Australia. So rather than just being in one location, to maybe hit a couple of spots where there are people, so that I can meet with individuals to talk about their projects, and maybe bring them on to the Fix the World platform if that's what they choose, to try to help everybody get their projects implemented. So those are really the two things I need. And like I said, I will be putting together a campaign that will be well organized, and there'll be a link that you can go to read all about the plans, and you can contact me right away. If you'd like, you can contact me at my email address, which is hopegirl587@gmail.com. If you're interested in helping out, or if you'd like to maybe host me at your home or a friend's home, or anything at all that you'd like to participate, or if you have a project that you'd like me to consult with you on when I'm there. So that's pretty much it for now, and more to come this week.
So, Hope, just to make it clear, you're actually a business analyst by profession.
Yes. I am a business analyst. I'm a project manager. I'm a financial analyst. I have a master's degree in business administration. So I do have some pretty good credentials from the business world. And what I'm really all about is taking those skills and talents from my experience in that world and bringing them into this new paradigm and helping people to make the transition from where we are and how we operate now into where we want to go. So there's a lot of changes that we need to make, which is the purpose of this show, is talking about, the repurposing of our different aspects of doing business. So those changes that we need to make, that's kind of what I'm specializing in right now. I call myself a new paradigm business consultant. So I hope that is pretty clear at the moment. There'll be more information when I put my campaign together. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, look, the whole point. There's many points to this weekend, but one of the main ones is planning. And
yes.
If we treat the Lake Conjola property as the first project, then Hope will be there to work, help us work out our objectives and how we get there. That's what it's actually all about. And in the meantime, we can have some discussions on this show and amongst ourselves about how we can actually leverage the most benefit from making facilities like Lake Conjola really come online. Now, to find more information about this event, if you go to the IUV website and look for Nova Earth News, just under the photograph of Holly Tucker, who is also coming to Australia. She's the Nova Earth News editor, and she's going to be reporting this event while she's here. And there's a lovely picture and lovely aerial shot of Lake Conjola there, where showing the lakes. This lake sits right up against the ocean. It's pretty much just a big sandbar between the lake and the ocean. That's sometimes open and sometimes not. Absolutely beautiful area. If you put your mouse over that and click on that, it'll take you straight to the page where there's contact information. And if you think you're interested in going, you really need to let Joe and Vanessa know so that they can actually allow for the correct number of people to arrive on the day. Their facilities at the moment are they can sleep in excess of 20 people quite comfortably. There's a bit more stuff coming online. And what they need to know from us is how much more work they need to do to actually get the facility up to just the number of people for this event. So to help them to get through that process, if you register, even if you you're going to go and you thought you'd register later, please register now so that we have the numbers correct and we aren't underestimating. I'm sure there'll be plenty of flexibility at the time, but planning is what it's all about. So anyhow, thanks guys for that. That's I
have to tell you something.
Yep.
I just got a Skype message from someone, so I have my first volunteer host family in Australia who have a project that they would like me to work on with them. So it begins.
It begins, yeah. We just put out
very
the call.
Exciting.
Yeah, but I mean, Hope just has been absolutely blown off her feet by the amount of response she got to a call for assistance from the universe, and it's been absolutely amazing to go on that little trip with her. And the donations still coming in, Hope, for the main crowdsourcing effort that you were doing?
Yes, I mean they've slowed down a little bit, and that's okay. They came in fast and furious all at once, and they slowed down a little bit. But the other thing too is I've started consulting and just offering my services to have consulting phone calls with people as another way for them to help contribute, where I can offer my services over the phone. And I've gotten a whole bunch of consulting appointments that I was doing over the last few days, and so far everyone is just very happy and pleased with what I'm able to offer and the way that I'm able to explain things to them for their individual needs. So that's another way that we've been helped out as well. So it is going very well.
Excellent. Well, we just need to get some donations going from the Australian crew. So if you're listening to this and you're from Australia, bring Hope to Australia. Donate whatever you're comfortable donating to one of Hope's websites. I've put her email address there. And do you want to give out your website, Hope, for wherever we can find the donate button?
Yes, you can go to the www.fixtheworldproject.org, and there are donate buttons all over that website, or you can go to gofundme.com/fix-the-world.
Mm-hmm. And the first one was just Fix the World, all one word, or fixtheworldproject.com?
Fixtheworldproject.org.
.org. Got to get the ending correct. I'll just put that in the chat room as well. Fixtheworldproject.org. Excellent. So if we Australian folk can boost up the donations, we will be bringing Hope to Australia, which will be absolutely superb. And yes, we do need some assistance with transport for Hope and accommodation as much as possible to make it all practical. And of course, the return energy we get is her very extensive planning and project management skills.
And can I also add, for those who might be willing to host me, I'm a very polite guest, and I'm a very good cook, and I just would love to help out in that area as well.
Fantastic. Well, really looking forward to meeting Hope. Excellent. So at this point, there was one other people's thing that I wanted to mention, which was yes. Something that's been brought up to me. The energetics at the moment are such that the internet is starting to give some performance problems. I was on a show earlier today. We were having a lot of problems with some of the connections, far more than usual. I noticed Joe's mobile connection was pretty dodgy. And basically the message that I got was to expect some more of that over the next few days. So if the shows over the next few days struggle a bit, that's just what's going on for everybody at this stage. Okay, so the next part of the show, we're actually going to be speaking to a politician, a member of the state government of South Australia in this country. She's a state politician, and I'm actually not sure which house she's in. Do you remember which house she's in, Rena? Is it the upper or lower house?
She's a member for the Legislative Council in upper house, I think.
So that's the upper house, yep. And she is an independent?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm going to call her now and bring her in, and we'll see if we can actually make the connection. Ring, 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 ring.
Fingers crossed the connection.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Anne Bressington of the Legislative Council. Please.
Okay, well, we'll have to try again in a moment. Now, Rena and I met Anne earlier this year at a meeting held in Geelong, which is a town about an hour away from Melbourne. And we spent 2 days, Rena, in a meeting with, it was about, at one point there was probably about 15 people there. And we had quite a long discussion about all sorts of topics. And Anne was very forthright about her views on what's working in Australian politics and what's not. I'll just try that call again.
Certainly didn't mince any words, did she?
No, she's spoken out publicly. She's on the internet, speaking out publicly. She's doing it. She's supporting the One People movement. She's supporting the work of the One People's Public Trust. And hopefully she's also at the other end of this phone line when we get through.
Hello, this is Anne Bressington.
Not at the moment.
Please ring my office on 8237-9596 or leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Okay, I might actually call that number, folks, in a moment and just see if we can get her attention another way. She did say she would be ready for us at that time, but not at the moment. So, one of Van's things she's focused on is Agenda 21. And just as a few introductory comments, my understanding of Agenda 21 is that it's the mechanism that was being used politically to attach our local communities to the United Nations via a whole lot of legislation that actually focuses on various things, but it's centered around the green agenda, and it's centered around the things like the emergency acts, things that involve the United Nations where there are natural disasters. And there's a lot of very, very nefarious things going on that actually on the surface of it look quite innocent. And an example of this, all countries associated with the UN tend to sign up for UN emergency legislation, let's call it that, programs, so that theoretically if there's some major disaster, the UN has our permission to come in and help them. Well, here's an example of one little twist they've put in there. In the case of a severe flood, the United Nations actually has control, can come in and take control. And any aspect of the infrastructure which is subject to major flooding comes under the control of the UN. Well, folks, you have sewer pipes under your houses, do you not? And there's the connection. That's the sort of thing they're trying to do, to attach us, in their eyes lawfully, to the United Nations, to override sovereign, essentially override any form of sovereignty, be it personal or national or state, anything. This is what's actually going on, and there's various flavors of that kind of legislation that are being put through the system from the top down at the moment, and they're in this country. And this is one of the questions I had for Anne, is they're actually at state level and filtering down to local. So they've gone through the federal level, now they're getting down to state level, and now's the time to intercept all of this activity. So Rena's actually going to give her a call. Scott and Hope, how
I've done that, Chris. Sorry to interrupt. I've done that, and she's standing by waiting for you to call.
Okay, I'll try it again. Unless I have I got the right number, so it did go through to a message.
May have been because you called through Skype. It comes up as that blocked number.
Yes, there is that.
Hello.
Hello, Anne. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. This is Chris Hales here. Just so you know who's speaking. We met earlier in the year at the meeting in Geelong.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Tis I, and we've got here with us Rena Iliades, whom you just spoke to, Scott Bartle, whom you've spoken to in the past, from Perth.
Yes.
And Hope Moore. You may have heard of Hope Girl and the Fix the World project.
Yes, I have. Yes.
You have. She's on the panel as well. So, welcome.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
I believe you've been unwell, and we hope you're feeling better.
Yes, I've had bronchial pneumonia, which is very strange.
And quite serious.
Yes, quite serious.
Quite serious.
Quite scary, actually.
Yeah, well, hopefully you won't get that again. It's one of those things that can hang around for a while.
Yeah. No, I'm feeling better.
Yeah, but Anne, there's a variety of questions that we'd like to go over with you, and I guess the first and foremost is the concerns you expressed when we met at the start of the year about how the entire system was being railroaded by Agenda 21.
Yes. Okay.
And how that's playing out. I mean, one of the things that I personally would like to know is the sorts of shenanigans they're doing with legislation which on the surface looks fairly normal and acceptable, but isn't.
Yeah. Yep. Sure. No worries at all. There's probably 100 examples of that one.
Well, pick one. One will do.
Okay. Am I on the air now?
You're on the air right now, Anne.
There you go.
We've got about we've got about 50, 60 people in the chat room, and we'll probably have quite a few hundred listeners.
Okay. Well, one of the most concerning ones is what they're doing with our farmers. And it was Peter Manuel, who was the founder of Flag SA, that was at that conference with me. And they're basically trying to talk farmers into giving up part of their land or ordering them to, for heritage status. And once it's declared heritage status, then it can never be used for any other purpose but heritage status. And they're also changing the titles of the land that people have had put away they bought it many, many, many years ago, and it's been in the family for decades. And they've changed the title on some of those lands, and then as they've changed the title, they've changed the purpose. And this has happened in both the Barossa Valley here and the McLaren Vale Valley, grape growing areas. Doesn't affect the grape growers, but it certainly affects the wheat farmers or the grain farmers, where they lose their land. They lose parts of their land, parcels of their land, and aren't reimbursed for that. And it makes it very, very difficult because people don't understand the way that the legislation is written. People rarely understand what the long-term ramifications are until, a Department of the Environment comes along and says, oh, you can't do that anymore because we changed the legislation. With the farmers, it's the metering of dams, it's licensing of dams that they've paid to build. And it's just this, what's the word for it? Just this, I call it covert operations, really, to try and force people into a corner, either financially or psychologically, where they just can't be on their property anymore. So we've got farmers walking off the land because it's all just too hard for them now, too expensive, or it's just all too hard.
The heritage status parcels they're supposed to give up, are they expected to just volunteer those without any sort of recompense?
Yeah, and the titles, the titles, as I said, change. So they've changed the boundaries on their land. And, it might only be 500 metres here or there, or creating animal corridors is another great way of ripping land off farmers. There's a whole thing going on, especially with our rural people, that people in the city are oblivious to. And it's a constant barrage of rules, regulations that our farmers are exposed to. And, of course, in the city, where we've got, the councils with their Agenda 21 green movement, everything's got to be environmentally safe, and every action that we undertake has got to be environmentally safe and can't leave a carbon footprint and all this sort of stuff. And this is just the beginning of this, trust me. Once this referendum for recognition of the councils in the Constitution, if that goes through, then Australians are going to have a huge battle on their hands to hold on to their properties.
Just a couple of quick questions about the farming titles. So, is this the sequence of events? They create some legislation which says farmers have to give up a certain amount of land for, say, an animal passage, and when they give up the land, they have to alter the titles. And while the title's being altered, they're actually changing the zoning of the land or regulations around the land? That's what they're doing?
Yeah. That's exactly what they're doing. And the farmers, we hear that we've been consulted with this, and this is necessary for the environment, and it's necessary for the status of the area, Barossa and Claren Vale. When those pieces of legislation went through, I was highly concerned about it, and I was told that the farmers were fine with this. Ones that were in the pathway of this progressive piece of legislation and protected piece of legislation. But it was about 4 months after the legislation went through that farmers actually then woke up to what it meant. And of course, once legislation is through, that's it. You can't get it. You can't get it brought back. You can't get it redebated. Nobody's interested. And the concerning part of this is that both the major parties were very much aware of what this would have meant to the farmers. And of course, in my speech, I mentioned this smells awfully like Agenda 21 to me, and I wouldn't be supporting it. But it didn't come down to my vote this time because the major parties agreed on what needed to be done. And we've got this denial of Agenda 21, even though now Campbell Newman in Queensland, the LNP have decided not to support any Agenda 21 initiatives in Queensland and made it quite public at their national conference. But we've still got the major parties denying that Agenda 21 even exists.
Yeah, they are playing that game, and of course the media are playing right along with them, which is the usual thing that you would expect. And the effect it's having on farmers per se, rules and regulations, and this kind of drastic change to their titles. Are they trying to actually control farming? Are they trying to remove farming? What are they actually up to?
Well, it's a bit of both, I think. I think they would much prefer that the successful farmers just move off their land and give up their land for a pittance because it's all too hard. They're forcing older farmers. Like I deal a lot with, the older generation of farmers between 70, 78 years old. They're still on the land, they love it. But they are having so much pressure put on them that they're just prepared to sell their farm and walk away and sell their farm for less than it's worth.
Who's buying up the farms, Anne?
Well, I don't get in with them into who's actually offered to buy the farms, but on 3 different occasions, it's been a Chinese interest that's bought up the farm, and that concerns me greatly. Because, not that I care about Chinese investment in Australia at all, but what we're seeing a great deal of is that a lot of these, one good potato farm up along the river up here, been there for 60 years producing great potatoes and onions and whatever, well, that's rumoured to be now set aside as part of a resort, a riverside resort. So it's our good arable farmland, land that's going to produce our food, that's being set aside for tourism, which to me is insanity. We've had another great big farm area in Mount Barker that was set aside for redevelopment as housing, and it's some of the best food-growing land in the state, and it now has hundreds of houses on it. So what we're seeing is the government is trying to either control farms or sell them off to develop. It's a bit like that building boom that they've got in China with those cities that are unoccupied. We're doing the same sort of thing here, only we're using our farmland, and that's exactly what they used in China for the big cities, was the good farmland to build these cities that nobody lives in anymore. And it's quite insane, but it reduces our food bowl, and it puts people on borderline of poverty. And, what's the point of it at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, Rena just put a note in the chat that hungry people don't resist their government.
That's right.
And I'm getting a big message about that the control of the food supply is certainly part of this. And Agenda 21's, one of the aspects of it has always been about removing private ownership of land. And that's what we're talking about here. It's privately owned farmland. And back in the local government level, this referendum, the fact that there's even a referendum to be held to acknowledge local government, does that tell us that local government is unlawful and that it's not recognised?
It should be.
Well, local government exists because state governments allow it to. Local government has never been part of the Constitution, but they exist because of legislation that state governments have created. And what we're seeing now, I remember when I first got into Parliament, and a member of the Labor Party, a senior member of the Labor Party, said to me, we should do away with state government altogether and just have local government. He said, wouldn't you like to be parachuted into local government instead of having to do this crap all the time? And I said, well, no, actually, I don't think I would. But the whole thing of the Labor Party is to do away with state governments. And for the majority of Australians, when they hear that, oh, great, get rid of the politicians. They're all paid too much anyway, rah, the usual. But in actual fact, people don't think this through about the fact that local government will then be quite free to introduce taxes and levies, the same as the state government does. And that once state government starts to get unravelled, that there will be less representation of your little area, your little council, on a federal level. And, it's about undoing the system as it is. Now, I know I'm very dissatisfied with the system, but you wouldn't want local government, the way they conduct themselves, with any more power than what they've already got. Well, I don't think you would.
No, Arena's just published Pirates of the Suburbs Part 2 and had a big reaction to it. And, even the mayor of Melton is actually under investigation as we speak, literally for political bribery.
Yep.
And it just seems to be a training ground for corruption that spreads further up the system as people move from local to state government to federal government.
Yeah, you're right. And we have our problems with our councils down here. I've just sat on a select committee for a particular local government council down here that's gone for 18 months. And same stuff, corruption. It was investigated. The government stopped the investigation before the report could be handed down. But the investigator himself said there were hundreds of examples of criminal conduct that have now gone unaddressed because the government closed down the investigation and didn't allow the report to be published. So you've got, not only do you have corruption at the state and local government level, but you've got this collusion as well that goes on between them. But is that justification for recognising local government? In our Constitution, I'd say it's pretty good justification not to, because it's not going to get better with constitutional recognition at all. It's going to get far worse. And they'll do what they do with an absolutely free hand and no accountability then.
Well, we appear to be in a fight for our very communities, Anne.
Oh, we're in a fight for our very lives, Chris. People shouldn't underestimate Agenda 21 and its reach. It's about what we can eat, when we can eat, how much we can eat, where we travel, where we can afford to travel, where we live, how we live. It will affect every aspect of our lives. And it's been, it's been on the rollout for a very, very long time. And we've only just woken up to it now because we're getting so many examples of people that we believe are being treated unjustly, but they are actually being treated according to this policy. And people need to understand that it's the sick and vulnerable as well. You look at the systems in our government, breaking down family units, the work harvest system, where if you are no longer a productive unit of the corporation, you're thrown on the scrap heap. If you have a legitimate claim because you've been injured at work through no fault of your own, you're taken through the courts for years and years and years and years before you can even get the medical attention that you require to heal. Your life is ruined. Your money is stripped away from you, whatever you have, to pay for legal fees. Child protection. I could go on and on and on. These are all part of this agenda to demoralise and break down first the family unit, then the people, and to strip us of any bit of, what's the word? I'd like to use another word other than fight, but determination, self-determination. Strip us of any self-determination that we have and have us living in fear that if we take one step to the left too far or one step to the right too far, that we're going to find ourselves caught up in these systems that once they've got you, they don't let go.
Yeah.
And, but people need to start, I think, to take an interest in what's being done in their parliaments.
Yeah.
And hello, Scott here. Got
yes,
a
Scott.
Quick question on, you mentioned some of the folk that are giving you feedback on the likes of the older farmers who are getting to the point where they just sell up. Have you had any other feedback from other farmers who are going, right, what can we do about this? Are there any folk that are sort of proposing to do certain things to resist this, or what's the feedback been in that regard?
I'm involved with a group I actually helped to start it up called Food Producers and Landowners Action Group. And, we have about, we have a few hundred members in that. We had Lord Monckton come over and do a rural tour to explain to people exactly what actions they could take, and it's about what we're starting to do now is hold individuals personally liable and responsible for their actions. So rather than try and take on a government department, we are dealing with the individuals who abuse their power and trying to get them into court on charges of trespassing or whatever, because no one's ever repealed those laws about your right to your property and to restrict people coming onto your property. So we're trying to use some of those laws to hold people accountable, but you know yourself, Scott, that the courts are part of the corporation.
Oh, yeah.
And the corporation will always find in favour of the corporation.
Yeah.
So what have we got? We've got people with signs on the gates listing High Court challenges that were successful before all of this got into full swing about people having access to your property. We're trying to get them on technical grounds, especially cattle farmers who have to be the only three and have to restrict movement on their farms because of this disease cattle get, to try and slow them down a bit. But at the end of the day, there is very few avenues available to people for any sort of legal recompense or recall for this. And that's what I guess concerns me the most, is that even if you're acting lawfully, you're still not winning because the courts, it gets turned around on you.
Yeah.
And the system is based on false allegations.
Yep.
And false allegations aren't able to be rebutted. You're going into a court trying to prove you're innocent, not them trying to prove that you're guilty.
Yeah.
That's the reverse of onus of proof, which means it's very, very difficult to prove false allegations. So yeah, we're sort of on a bit of a tightrope at the moment.
Yep.
I have advised people to issue courtesy notices to individuals in this process, but a lot of the farmers that I deal with actually don't even have computers.
Yeah.
So for them to be able to get onto the internet and look up what the FUQ video or any of the OPPT stuff or any of that is impossible for them. And you've got to admit, when you try and explain this to people, it sounds pretty out there. You know, and it's coming from a politician. It's even less believable, trust me. So I'm trying very, very hard to educate people on the fact that, you know, all this is basically just pretend now. And they're just playing because we let them. But it's very difficult to get that message across.
It is. And we're... Sorry?
Hi, and this is Hope, and it's such a pleasure to meet you and speak with you. I have a quick question for you. Can you tell us what the average person could do to get involved? Because I'm sure we've got a lot of people listening saying, okay, I understand, and I'm grateful to have the education about 10 to 21, but what can I do as an average person to get involved, to fight against this, to resist this, or just anything that they might be able to do on a local level?
Look, I've been basically telling people to write letters, the notices, the final notices, to councils, to their state members, to their federal members. I think the most important thing that we can do is let them know that we know. Even if we're not really 100% sure on all of the facts, especially in Energy 21, because it's such a far-reaching policy. You know, you ask the question, do you understand what Agenda 21 is and where it originated from? Do you understand how Agenda 21 is being implemented? Most of them will write back and say, you know, Agenda 21 is it's a nothing. It doesn't exist. We're not doing it. But that gives you the opportunity then to write back and say, well, gee, sorry, you actually are doing it, or the departments are implementing this, and this is how, and how it's affecting you as an individual, you as a community, as part of the community. And start that dialogue with them, because let me tell you, people think it's the politicians that are doing this, but it's not. It's the bureaucracy. And, you know, bureaucracies, governments come and go, bureaucracies stay forever. It's the top bureaucrats that are implementing this and rolling it out. They educate the ministers as they come and go. And, of course, the ministers are in these jobs for like a nanosecond. So they have 3 or 4 portfolios that they've got to get on top of. So they actually don't ask the questions. They don't ask the how, what, when, why, who. So it's up to us, the people, to educate the ministers and let the bureaucrats know that we know. And, of course, it's like shining that light in a dark room. Once you turn the light on, well, you know, it's all there to be seen. And that's our job. That's our job as upholding and protecting our freedom, to take those sorts of actions and be proactive with it. Instead of everybody relies on, you know, the politicians to fix it. Well, let me tell you, people power is far more effective than political power if we choose to use it.
Yeah, and that's largely what this show is about, and the other certainly the One People show on the day following this one is all about, you know, how do we actually empower ourselves? What is it that we do at the ground level to actually have an effect on the system? In fact, this show is actually called the Repurposing, and we did have some discussions about that when we met down in Geelong about, you know, how do you actually shift? Let's say the opportunity exists to shift the system, and we're heading in that direction at the moment. There's things going on that may topple all of this into the mainstream and give us an opportunity to actually do this shift for real. How do we actually repurpose things at community level, at government level, in commerce, etc., etc.? That's what this particular radio show is talking about, and it's great to have you on here. It's our third show, and we're about to start on some of the main even issues about how we govern ourselves, and we're going to start a bottom-up conversation. It's going to be a community upwards conversation that we're about to launch into, literally on this show. And at the same time, all around the planet, we're finding groups like Hopes, like Fix the World, are springing up everywhere, and they're actually forming the beginnings of new communities inside the existing communities. And
yes.
It's a very, very energetic conversation, and we're trying to put out, waves of thought on how to go about this. And because
Chris,
go ahead. Yep.
I was going to say, freedom for me, freedom is a state of mind, and people in their heart know that they're not free to be and do as they choose to. And I believe the first step in that is asserting yourself as an individual and as a group. So you assert yourself as an individual, but you also then become part of a much bigger group. That takes time. But to repurpose successfully, I believe people need to be focused on what it is they want to achieve. And I would say that the most important thing to be achieving right now is the education of people in government departments and, forget the chief executives. I've given up with chief executives of government departments because they know exactly what they're doing and they know why they're doing it. They don't need to be educated. They need to be removed. But it's the people, the people below them that really are only following orders. And we've had some success with, we show up when someone comes out to measure a farmer's dam and decide whether they need to purchase a licence or not. And we'll sit down with the guys who are measuring the dam and have a conversation with them, and I take my material out there about foreclosure and all of that sort of stuff with me in OPPT and educate them on the banks of the dam and have a chat with them and sit down and have a cup of coffee with them. And they themselves aren't able to do anything to stop, the measuring of the dam or the issuing of licences. But you can see it in their eyes that they get it when you're talking to them. And then a few weeks ago we had a meeting of the farmers and food growers. And two of these people who were measuring the dams actually showed up at the meeting.
Wow.
And sat there and listened to what the farmers were saying. It's a slow process doing it this way. There's only, like half a dozen of us doing it, but it's doing something to re-educate people to the fact that, in 10 years' time, mate, this might be you and your family in the suburbs. They might be coming to measure your tanks and to license your tanks and to restrict your water usage. So it's about, that slow process of getting people to understand that there is a better way and standing in your own power and not being afraid to speak the truth. And that's what I find. People find it difficult to talk about OPPT because it all sounds like it's just so out there. But who was it, Hitler, who said it was easier to believe a lie than it is to believe the truth? And the bigger the lie, the easier it is to believe. So when I find something unbelievable, I tend to believe it's the truth because, people buy a lie far quicker. So I do make sure that people get the reading material printed off my computer about OPPT and the foreclosure, and eventually something else will come up that they'll go, oh, God, I remember someone else saying something about that. And it might spur them to read the information or whatever. But I don't believe that any action, any word spoken, or any thought put out there is ever wasted or doesn't ever land exactly where it's meant to land when the timing is right. So no matter what people are doing, no matter how they're doing it, no matter what thoughts they're putting out there, all of those things, thoughts, actions and words, will land exactly where they need to land when the timing is right. So nothing's wasted.
Yeah, and the OPPT filings, you've had a really good understanding of those for some time. And we're actually really grateful that we have at least one politician in Australia who really knows this and gets it and understands it. But you actually had those filings reviewed by a barrister friend of yours when they first came out, and he had a very interesting comment about them.
Yes, that's right. Well, I had known this person. He was actually a friend of the family, so he wasn't. He was somebody that I believed I could trust for an opinion, a view on it. And it just so happened, you talk about coincidence or synchronicity or whatever it is you want to call it, that for 2 days I'd been reviewing the information on UCC and what the FUQ and, started at the very beginning and worked my way through. And this particular lawyer, well, he's a corporate lawyer, he's a corporate barrister actually, so he'd been fairly high up in corporations, and he was actually in South Australia for the weekend, and he'd rung me and said we should catch up for a coffee. And so I took all my paperwork with me, printed it all out, took it with me, and we spent 6 hours going through all of the info and having a discussion. And I said to him, all I want is your opinion on whether this looks right to you or not. And at the end of the 6 hours, he said to me, look, he said, this absolutely has legs. He said, there's no doubt about that. He understood about, well, didn't understand it in depth, but he understood about UCC and how all that worked. And he said to me, it has legs. Absolutely. He said, but the problem is going to be the enforcement of this. That's going to need to be done by the people. He said, because there is, as far as he knew, there was no authority that could actually enforce the UCC filings. And, of course, that meant that it needed to be the people needed to wake up and understand that we were propping up a system that had been foreclosed on. And he said, how do you work that out? How do you do that? Well, that's your gig, But that's what needs to happen is people need to be educated in the fact that this has happened and this is real. And that's the only way that he could see the system could actually be grinded to a halt. And people be held to account.
That's it. Now, one of the, best ways to enforce this is peaceful non-compliance. But as you say, people have to know and be educated. And one of the purposes of this show is to bring out information to fill that void. I mean, people say, okay, we're going to shut the system down, but then what do we do? What's next? Because that brings out a fear reaction in people, and it's actually one of the things that stops them from taking action against the system itself. So we're trying to put out ideas about how we go about transitioning from this mess that we're in into something that really serves everybody. That's the conversation we're trying to have here. And look, I'm so grateful that you actually brought up the idea of taking back each person taking back their personal free will, their personal responsibilities, because that's the enforcement.
Well, that is the only way to do it. Individual by individual, and then that becomes a group, and then that becomes a community, and on it goes, and it spreads out. But you have a lot of people out there, you're right, that are fearful of what happens. I have never advised anybody to try a courtesy notice on their mortgage right now, because the system still believes the system exists. And I'm quite fearful of people that would go down that road and then lose everything. So I've used and advised people to use the courtesy notices as an education tool to educate people in certain positions that, your institution has been foreclosed on. This is when it's happened, this is how it's happened, this is why it's happened. take this away, have a read about it, and maybe a couple of weeks' time we can get together and have a chat. And, interesting. I fully believe that people that get it will read those documents, and I get it because this is what happened to me. I read the documents and I felt them. I just knew that it was right. There was just that, I don't know whether it was a spark of hope or what it was, but I felt the energy of the documents, and I just knew it was right. And a lot of other people are going to be switched on that way as well. And that's why this repurposing can happen at the grassroots level first. We can't start at the top and move down because, as I said, the people at the top know exactly what they're doing. But you start with the people at the grassroots level that are just following orders, doing their jobs, and you start to educate them in different areas. And they want to be free just the same as everybody else does. They want to mortgage just the same as everybody else does. They get slammed just the same as everybody else is. And they'll feel get it, and they'll talk to somebody else about it. And there's no better way to communicate than through the grapevine, believe me. So I believe there are far more many people out there now that know this to be true than what we even know, than what we comprehend. And I believe it's happening. It's going to happen organically. It is going to happen organically.
Yeah, I believe so too, Anne. And Anne, look, I just looked at the time, and we've gone nearly into 45 minutes, and I really want to thank you for spending the time with us today. And I'll let you go now and get on with your day, and we'll get on with the rest of the discussion we're going to have today. But please, our gratitude and thanks for your commentary today. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Anne.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, we'd like to speak again in the future. That will be lovely.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay.
And you have thank
Bye-bye.
yous in the chat too, Anne?
Yes.
You've got thank yous in the chat too.
Yep. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Wow, that was fantastic. Yeah, that was. It's so good to have someone at that level who understands what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was incredible.
And there's plenty more. There's lots, and some of them I think don't necessarily want to speak out or make their support public, but from the interactions I've had with several people sort of in the political game, so to speak, definitely are in support of this. And what you'll find is that they're not getting any media, any mainstream media attention, and so it seems that there's no mainstream political support, but I can tell you that there is. It's just not being reported.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Well, interesting. The feedback there from Anne was definitely to discover your own personal sovereignty and stand in your own space.
It was. That keeps coming up time and time again.
That is our key. I mean, to me, without that, your next steps are they're not going to happen.
No.
So it's discovering that personal sovereignty and standing in your own space. And then the other thing she mentioned was about sharing this information with others. So I'm taking particularly, you've got your neighbours, which we discussed on other shows. A lot of folk are not even aware or know who their neighbours are. So the first step to encouraging your community would certainly be starting with your neighbours. And then also, Anne suggested about writing off to your pollies or your bankers.
It was very interesting that she spoke of the problem centering around the top bureaucrats who are, literally holding this sick system we've got together as the politicians come and go. And they need to get the message too that the people know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'd certainly suggest, if in writing to the politicians or that sort of thing, is single out one single issue for your letter. Don't write a diatribe. Just pick one single question and hammer that one particular topic. And if you don't get a suitable answer to it, write back and express that your question was not answered. And the beauty of keeping it to one issue is that it's very easy in the follow-up to hold them to the one thing that you asked. You can basically say, look, I only asked one question. Please answer it. Whereas if you've gone and rambled on and written about everything else, it's very difficult to sort of hold them to the one issue that you really want. If you want to write on a separate issue, or multiple issues, do it in a separate letter. But
yeah,
one and go hard on it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Scott. And you'll find that in the video, the one issue we focus on is why can't we record? And we don't divert from that. That we've just got one very simple question: why can't we record? Show us the law.
Yep.
We don't go into the Local Government Act is unconstitutional, it wasn't ratified by the Queen, it wasn't assented, the Governor-General is, part of the corporation, it's not a proper government. We don't go into all that sort of stuff. We just stick to one very simple question. And they essentially gave themselves enough rope to hang themselves. And, if you stick to the one question, like you said, Scott, it keeps the focus.
Mm. Yeah, well, part of the repurposing process is dealing with the existing system, and we have to understand how to properly address that system, to bring it up short wherever possible, to actually negate its actions wherever possible as we go through this process. So, it's a big job we have here in front of us, folks. I'm going to check the audio recording after the show. I'm hoping that the phone calls we've had are recording better than they're actually playing back through Blog Talk, because they're pretty choppy. But managed to get enough through, and signal came and went. But great information. I really enjoyed listening to her views. Hello, have I lost you all?
No, I'm still here.
Still there?
Still here.
Yep,
Still
good,
here.
good. Well, jump in whenever you like. Now, Anne's lovely, and look, she's obviously been struggling with this for a long time, and she found the One People's Public Trust work, and obviously completely resonated with her, and it's turned her into a little fire inside the system, which is great, because she
there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that she mentioned that really resonated with me. I love how she said people power is more powerful than political power.
Yeah.
That I will carry with me for the rest of my days at this point on, coming from someone like her. And I really appreciated how she shared her perspective, being in the position that she's in, of how it comes from the top down. Because I've spoken to today I spoke to a politician in the United States, and it was a very similar story of, they snuck things through. They placed something down in front of these public servants, and then they just forced you to sign it, and you have no idea what you're voting on. And I'm just really happy that she shared that perspective, because it's really good for all of us to understand that we are all human beings, and we are all in this together, and most of us have good hearts and are trying to do the right thing. And that's why that education is probably the most important thing we can do, because that's probably our biggest problem, is that most people just don't know. So educating in that calm, focused way that Scott was talking about, by sending the letters so that you have a focused communication to, your senators and your politicians and all of the people that are in this system that are victims as well. That's really one of the best things that we can do.
Yeah, Rena spoke to me the other day about she was thinking of actually starting a dialogue with the mayor and point out to the mayor that she was as much of a victim in this as everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that that's important. And, one of the things that Anne also said was that it's the people sort of in the higher echelons of politics that kind of keep the controls in place, and it's the people, particularly at a local level, at local politics level, are the ones that implement all these things, and they don't necessarily know sometimes why they're implementing what they're implementing or how it actually came about. And I'll give you a really good example. I had someone contact me. They were at the Melton Council meeting, which is the last meeting that just happened. And the address that they used, because when we put in a question to council, you've got to put the address and your phone number and your name and all the rest of it. What the purpose of that is, I'm not quite sure. Now, the address that he'd used was actually a property that was given to him by his uncle that happens to be in the same shire, in the same district. And he's never used that address before. And he's very, very active, and he's coming along to a lot of the meetings, and he's supporting what we're doing and all the rest of it. And funnily enough, he actually received a letter 3 days later that said, we've been to that property, we've inspected that property, and that property needs to have a car and I think a couple of other items, they listed what they were, removed from the property within 28 days, or you'll be liable for a penalty of 1,200 units, which is actually a fine of $169,000. So what they're doing is that they're using the Environmental Protection Act to essentially, at a local level, to essentially almost like get revenge on people that are standing up for themselves. And it's when you come across that you start to realise that, they're protecting their own position, but what they don't realise is the harm that they're doing by protecting their own position. And, protecting your own position can only be valid for so long before it becomes not acceptable on a mass scale. And I think we're seeing that happen now. People have essentially said we've had enough. We're not going to allow you to use all these things against us to silence us, and we will stand and we will be counted. And, people are taking back their own power, and I think that's important.
Very, very important. It's part of this equation that we're working on.
Well, something else I just wanted to add real quickly is that while we were talking to Anne and she was telling us about situations and we were referring to specifically Australia, I saw a lot of comments in the chat room saying, yep, it's the same here, it's the same here. Raina had also mentioned that it's universal, that this is a problem that is not just in one particular company. It is definitely a global agenda, and we're all being affected by it, regardless of what country we live in.
We are. It's a template. They just apply the same thing with variations right throughout the corporate system, which is what we're dealing with here. And the discussions you've had with the senator in the United States are about this kind of subject, Hope?
Yes, I mean there's been it's the same feeling. It's just there are good people who are trying to serve the public, and they're fighting hard and they're doing what they can, but they're in a certain position that is, pretty much they don't have as much control as a lot of us might think we do. It really does come from a higher level, and it's like I said, it really is universal.
Yeah, the actual go, Scott. Yep.
Yeah, Rena mentioned the same thing. It's like they're in that catch-22 situation where they're given the appearance of being a leader, and yet they've got folk pulling strings from higher up that are behind the curtains, and there's some folk who are aware of it and some folk aren't, and that's where I liked Anne's aspect of let these folk know and share it around, share the information. That's the awareness side of things. And at least by shining the light on some of these things, we'll at least start bringing it out in the open. And I think that's where our solutions are going to start bubbling up to the surface if someone says, well, actually, I'm going to go do this. And next thing you know, there's a whole heap of people going, yeah, I like that. I'm going to go do that with him or her.
Yeah, there's a real message in what Anne said, that the top bureaucrats actually hold this, they're holding this system together. And they are the ones that are actually really directing what's going on here. The politicians come and go, and you can manipulate politicians because they are transient, and they know it. There's a very great English series called Yes Minister, and if you want to know how politics really works, catch it sometime. You probably have to get it on DVD. It's about the interactions between a senior politician and his top public servant, and it's very clear who's in charge, extremely clear. So we need to take that message, because they're the people we need to keep in. We need to be communicating with those bureaucrats in the same way that we're communicating with the politicians. Okay, so let's leave the politics aside for the moment. What we're going to do now for a little while is introduce the subject that we've been coming up to after these first two introductory shows, which is ultimately, what is our objective in this shift that we're going to be undergoing? What is the destination that we want? Because project planning is done by nominating the destination and working back to this moment of now. And once we've established a picture in our minds of what the destination needs to be, then we can start talking about how we get there from here. So we've had lots of discussions about this preparatory to this over the last week or two. And the way that we're going to start this is with what's called a thought experiment, which is essentially a visualization of the destination, of where we want to go. Now, based on all the work of the OPPT and Heather and the state that the world now is, even though it is unacknowledged, it is actually a completely level playing field with literally every person on the planet on that playing field in equity, with no divisions. Okay, no political divisions, no corporate divisions, nothing. We're just in equity. There's 7 billion of us. We have to create a community which will allow us to maintain our free will permanently without being corrupted. And the guide that we've got, the starting point of our conversation, is the description of the CVAC system that was actually presented to us by the trustees. This, as if you could view it at this point as their suggestion, because the situation now is that we're on this planet absent limits. There's 7 billion of us absent limits, and we can actually do anything that we choose by consensus to do. And I use that word very carefully, by consensus, and we're going to discuss even what that means. We'll probably have to go to that next week. But at the moment, I just wanted to start a discussion between the four of us about what is the structure, the structure of governance, of self-governance specifically, that we can build here that will serve us properly in the way that we want to be served. And my starting point, my first statement for this thing is, it needs to be a structure without hierarchy. So what do you say to that, panel?
I'd like to go first, because we had a brief discussion about this earlier. Definitely a structure without hierarchy, which is the old paradigm structure that we've been suffering under all this time, in my opinion. But I also feel that that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have any leaders or leadership. It's just a different form of leadership, and we were talking a little bit about how to repurpose that particular role, because leaders are not necessarily part of a hierarchical structure. Some people are now leaders in certain areas, and I think it's a healthy thing to have leaders in a self-governing system, because some are leaders and some are followers, and we're all in this together. So that was my thought.
Indeed. And Scott, we've got a language that we need to be developing as we describe this new situation. Any suggestions about what we would call the leadership role? there's a lot of I'll just preface that by saying there's a lot of terminology that comes with baggage from the old system. Doesn't mean we don't want to reclaim it for ourselves, but sometimes for the purpose of having a discussion, we need to define other words that we want to use. So as far as that aspect that Hope's just mentioned is concerned, what are you leaning towards in terms of words to use to describe the leaders and the leadership?
Well, there's not a whole lot to actually pick from. I mean, you look at the bastardizations of what we've got. I mean, for a starter, you throw in the word lawyer, and most people would turn around and run. Same with politician. Unfortunately, it's just tainted. So even you put something like president, and there's a mental association with dictators. There's all sorts of things that have been tainted. So in terms of a word for a leader of that kind, you start going down the road of wishy-washy things like facilitator, pass. There's it's a tricky one.
Yep. Rena, do you have any suggestions on the name?
I do. I kind of tend to visualize things, and I would see leaders as lighthouses. I think there will be a little bit of a storm that people kind of need a little bit of guidance through, and I have a different view on leadership. I believe everyone is a leader, or everyone has the potential to be a leader. And if I was to put it into sort of like a visual picture for someone, I would, see leaders as those that, hold a candle, hold a light, and pass it on to others so that they can become leaders themselves, so that they can pass on the information and pass on the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Wayshowers.
Yeah, so I go ahead, Hope.
Oh, sorry. I just have a fabulous suggestion from a friend of mine. Recognized council steward.
Council steward. Steward is a word that we've kicked around, which I quite like. It has an air of, if you like, wisdom without necessarily having authority. Because the key issue here for me is that in the system we're currently in, we've given away our free will. We've allowed other people to actually exercise power over us, authority over us. We've used the representational system, the hierarchical representational system, to do that. So what I'm thinking of in my mind when I visualize this is a situation where the people who actually, if you like, lead this, and I'll just call it the self-governance system, whatever term we end up using for that, actually have they actually have our permission to ask one question, which is, what do you want? To all the people. Could be, what do you need, but what do you want? That's the only thing they have our permission to do. And the only other thing they have our permission to do is that when we tell them, they have our permission to organise other groups to achieve that on our behalf in service to us.
And again, that's only if that's what you choose to participate in. If you don't choose to participate on that, you're free to go do your own thing, as long as it doesn't interfere with others.
Precisely, because this is where we need to get back to. In fact, sorry, Rena, go ahead. You're going to make a comment.
Yeah, I think this can take many, many, many forms, and one of the things that I've noticed is that, when a group, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be a movement, say the Occupy movement, for instance, and this doesn't apply to all groups or indeed individuals within those groups. But we tend to sort of, if they're not following my path, well, then they're doing it wrong. And what we need to understand is that, for me personally, I'm happy regardless of what method people use, whether they approach their local council, whether they use that method in order to educate others, whether they do that by actually going to court and using that technology and using that process, whether they use the free man movement process. Really, to me, it doesn't really make any difference, because at the end of the day, we're all kind of aiming to the same thing. We're all aiming for the same thing. So it doesn't matter what path we use or what road we use to get there. We're all going to the same place. We all want to reach that same place of absolute freedom, absolute abundance, because we all know that it's there. We know that it's there. We know in our hearts that it's there. We just have to, make it manifest. And what method you use to do that is almost a moot point. It's irrelevant.
Okay, so going back to the discussion, yeah, I agree, Rena. There are a number of different ways to psychologically and lawfully extricate yourself from the old system. But
absolutely.
If we're all standing on that big level playing field, and we have to get ourselves organised, what is it that we actually do to ensure that we get service, that we don't recreate hierarchy, which is what the kind of the direction I'm heading in with the conversation here. How do we actually reach that stable situation where we have a group of individuals carrying out tasks on our behalf for the greater good?
And I think the answer to that question, for me personally anyway, is that process starts by taking one step back. And what I mean by that is that process starts with the individual understanding their own freedom first. You can't show someone how to get to a place without you being there yourself. And so what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that it touches on what Anne said a little earlier, that freedom is a state of mind. That is absolutely true. Freedom is not a law of the state. It is a state of mind. And that's the very, very first step. Before we even start thinking about, how we're going to organise this in, manifest it within our communities. So I think that's the first step, and it's very important because it touches on also what we were discussing earlier, which is that you can know every single law in a book verbatim. You can know all the process verbatim. You can understand the process of completing an affidavit and what the protocols are in court and all that sort of stuff. But if you don't know who you are, whatever process it is that you're using, if you don't understand the internal essence and of the all-powerful being that you are, and who you actually are and what you are, and where you fit into the scheme of things, then it doesn't matter how many laws you know verbatim.
No, it doesn't. It does not. In fact, let's pull back one little step further from our level playing field thought experiment. The underlying principle on which we interact with one another at a one-to-one level, at a group level, at a multi-group level, and in an entirety, to my mind, the foundational principle on which we work has to be the simple expression of the key universal law of free will. Now, in order to understand free will, you have to actually understand who you are, which is what Rena was alluding to. Now, let's assume that process has taken place, and we have, for the most part, every person on the planet understanding who they are as individuals, and we say to one another, well, how are we going to interact with one another? It's a free will universe, we can't just run riot. And the universal law that I'd like to focus on for these discussions, the way that it's expressed is the way that Heather actually expressed it in the filings, which was that any free will action is permissible, except for in a free will action that abrogates the free will choice of another being. Okay, so if we use that as being the measuring stick for the discussion that follows, what Scott said about having free will to do whatever we wanted to do, we can do that. And
is it
the process by which we achieve the state of knowing that we're a free will being and knowing why we're here, let's assume that's done, because that's really part of the transitioning. Most of the people here in this discussion understand where they are and who they are. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, perhaps it's worth sharing a visual of that aspect of free will that we discussed recently. If you express that graphically in terms of circles on a page, on a piece of paper, so in a two-dimensional kind of realm, you've got two circles side by side. Each of those circles can expand to however big they like, in terms of each one being their own free will. It's only when those circles touch do you need consent. So when those circles touch and overlap, that overlapping is the consensual interaction between those two individuals, both exercising their free will. If one of those individuals does not consent, then you've got the free will of one abrogating the free will of another. And so one of the aspects of the aspects of that consent are, as I see it, one is that the consent is informed consent, and the other one is that it's voluntary. So you can't be forced or coerced into consent. It's voluntary consent, and it's fully informed, or you have full disclosure. So I've been visualizing that in terms of how your free will works, is your little circle can expand to however big you like, but at the instant it starts to butt up against another circle, and even wanting to overlap, you need the consent. And what I think's been going on with a lot of us on this earth for a long time is that our circles have been pretty much squashed and overlapped by others driving or bulldozing over the top of us without our consent, and specifically without our knowledge. So I just thought I'd share that visual as to...
Yeah, that's a great visual, Scott. I really resonate with that. That's a really good visual, and it keeps things simple, and it's very, very easy to understand. Like you said, once they overlap, that's the point where you absolutely need consent. And what we have to understand is that, we are a fractal of the one. There's no man in the sky that's going to come and save us, and there's no, we are who we've been waiting for. I've heard so many people say that, and it is so true. We are.
Mm-hmm. You have to stand up.
Yeah, and respect each other. I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And because the system has sort of disrespected our free will, it's almost become normal to disrespect. And we don't see disrespect when we're confronted with it, because it can take many, many, many forms. And so I think it's also, respecting the essence of the other person as well. And even if you don't agree with what they're doing, well, so be it. That's their free will. That's their choice. That's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, we are a fractal of the one. So even if we, hurt another being, we're in fact hurting ourselves. And that's what we have to, understand, I guess. But that's a great visualization, Scott. Yeah. Beautiful visualization.
Okay, so, thanks, Scott. Sorry to jump on you there. So at the moment, our thought experiment consists of the following, because we'll have to build this up in stages. We're on a level playing field, so that represents our equity. Okay, everybody is equal, so we're on a completely level ground. There's a very large number of us, and we know who we are. We know that that we're in a free will universe. We have free will. And we know how to actually exercise our free will without impinging on another. Okay, so I'm sort of trying to move the scenario forward in little steps so we get to the point of how do we actually make this work for a very large group of people on a very long-term basis as a stable methodology, a stable technology. Now I'm looking at the time here, and I'm thinking we're going to have to leave it there for this week, take it up next week, and I think we'll spend most of next week pushing this forward because I want to take a couple of calls very quickly. We've got about 5 minutes, so I would like to take about 3 minutes to actually do that. In fact, no, the stream is telling me I've got less than that left, but there is a problem with the stream timing at the moment, so we'll see how it goes. So remember that, folks, for next time. We're on a level playing field. We're in a free will universe, and we're aware of it, and we know the parameters it operates under. Okay, and we will go over these steps next time before we talk, because the next step is to start to talk about how we self-organize, and that's one of the really key questions that we need to answer to get back onto how do we get there. So I'm going to very quickly take a call. Thanks, panel, by the way. That was really good. I'll very quickly take a call. Area code 720. Hello. Hello, 720. I think that's okay. I think they're just listening in. Some people have their hand up without realizing it, so I'll try area code 218. Hi, could we have your name, please?
Hey, it's Daniel. Hey, Chris.
Daniel, how are you this week?
I'm great, man. Hi, Rena. Hey, Scott. Hey, Hope.
Excellent. Yeah, did you have a question, Daniel? Because your hand was up.
Yeah. I just had a really quick point, because I know you're pressed for time, but I think Hope is a huge organizing opportunity with Australia that you can plug in with. I saw kind of a reference that Anne made to the farmers not having computers, and I have a ton of experience of working with really technologically isolated communities in the rural Midwest, and I think you should pursue that and try to find somebody who has the technological savvy and the time, not that it takes much technological savvy to make phone calls, but these farmers must have phones, and to use the tools that are available, that have been made available by the OPPT and the IUV to make phone calls to those farmers, a college student or some retired person or someone who has the will and energy to take up the project, make those phone calls, get all the details from those farmers, and print them off in the city or wherever it is, and send the farmers out the paperwork for the CNs and the billing notices, so that the farmers can sign them and send them in to the appropriate quote-unquote authorities.
Great. Look, thank you, Daniel.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. We'll certainly hope we'll be following that up by the sound of it. So I'll pop you back on hold, Daniel. Yep, we do have to finish up today, so we're going to be closed down in about 60 seconds. Okay, there we go. She told us in 60 seconds. So Hope, Scott, and Rena, thank you for your time today. We did leave ourselves short on the conversation, but we'll make up for it next week by really pushing that visualization forward, and then we can get down to the meat of the situation. So a quick goodbye from me, and thank you for everyone for listening. Rena and Scott.
Yeah,
and
I said it was going to be fun, and time flies when you're having fun. So.
It does. It does. And Scott?
Thanks, guys. Good show today.
Great stuff. Hope?
Great show today, and I'm glad that we just touched on that topic, because it's going to be a big conversation when we really dive into it.
Oh, yeah.
Looking forward to it.
It is the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
Great to have everyone's company on the show today. We'll leave it there for this week, and we shall see you all next week.